Welcome to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society of Canada's webcast called Survivor and Caregiver Burnout. This presentation is part of the Your Life After Cancer series. In this presentation, Dr. Ashley Margeson and Jeremy Hayman will discuss the realities of survivor and caregiver burnout and how we can work to prevent it from happening. My name is Sonia Muto. I'm the Community Program Coordinator for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society of Canada. I will be the host of this online event. During the webcast, you will hear only my voice and the speakers' voices. The presentation will last approximately 45 minutes and will be followed by a 15-minute question and answer period. This presentation is also being recorded, so therefore, you will be able to listen to it again on our website while following along with the PowerPoint presentation. We will send you an email when the recording is available. At the LLSC, we offer guidance and support to people affected by blood cancer every step of the way. We are happy to announce the launch of our Your Life After Cancer program. We know that every cancer experience is unique and each step has a deeply personal meaning. For one person, life after cancer can mean letting go of things you can't control. For another, it's about managing physical and cognitive effects, or it is being present with their family. With time, survivors can find a new and more meaningful way of life, but may need support getting there. We are committed to building the tools and resources you may need to help you move forward after your blood cancer experience. Visit yourlifeaftercancer.ca for these new tools and resources. For example, you can review our new fact sheets on important topics such as adapting to cancer-related fatigue, managing brain fog, or supporting your loved one. You can also read, listen, or download stories of people who have experience with life after cancer or people who are managing a chronic blood cancer. Additionally, you can visit our new website to access multimedia resources, such as webcast recordings and podcasts with experts in the field. For example, social worker Margot Kennedy shares insights on managing overwhelming feelings and stresses, or social worker C. Elizabeth Doherty presenting on searching for new meaning and finding a new normal. It is now time to begin our presentation. It is my pleasure to introduce our speakers today, naturopathic doctors Dr. Ashley Margeson and Jeremy Hayman. As members of Cornerstone's medical team, both of these down-to-earth and science-based professionals focus on your quality of life, from understanding lifestyle implications to stress reactivity to knowing when your body is going to tip before it actually happens. Dr. Jeremy and Dr. Ashley will give you tools to be able to implement simple strategies. To top it off, Cornerstone Naturopathic was named Nova Scotia's top holistic clinic by the Star in 2019. But what matters most to them is mixing a whole lot of love and listening to the science to get you feeling and living your best. Over to you.
Hi guys, good afternoon.
Hello.
We are sitting in probably the rainiest day we've had in Nova Scotia so far this year, and we are really excited to chat with you today about burnout. So not just specifically from what it's like to start to recover in the survivorship journey after cancer, but also what it's like as a caregiver to talk about burnout. So before we get into kind of what burnout actually is and how do you know what's happening in your body in regards to that kind of scientific and physiological response, we want to touch on a couple very interesting research papers that have come from not only the United States, but also the UK in the last number of years. We know, based off a lot of this research, that caregivers experience a significant detrimental impact to their overall burden, well-being, and quality of life when they are helping somebody or living with somebody with cancer. We look a lot from a science perspective as endpoints such as mental health, anxiety, depression, physical health, and a number of different symptoms. But what our job becomes in this conversation is piecing those parts of the puzzle together and making it make sense for you. So a research paper may say that 76% of caregivers experience X, Y, or Z. Our job becomes going, are you part of that 76% or are you part of a different percentage, and how is it impacting the rest of your life? We also know when it comes to survivorship that approximately 30% of cancer survivors examined reported having stress and depressive symptoms. This is going to be something that we touch on in a couple slides because there is actually a difference between depression and burnout. And what this leads to is the diagnostic criteria of post-traumatic stress disorder, which is PTSD, that has been adjusted into how we define kind of mental disorders in a way to include the diagnosis and treatment of a life-threatening illness such as cancer. So before I continue talking, and you guys all kind of question as to why I'm the one talking about everything and Dr. Jeremy's just sitting here, we're basically splitting our presentation in half, which is kind of how we work with patients around here too. We focus on burnout, and we're going to explain how that works. And then Jeremy's really going to deep dive into what it means for survivorship and what it means in specific regards to cancer. Right?
Great.
Look at that. So what is burnout? Well, in the easiest sense, burnout is a physiological low-grade response to long-term stress adaptility. And we use this definition very specifically because the word adaptility is critical when it comes to burnout. Generally, you don't burn out after, let's say you were late to work one day and you were racing through traffic and you got you blew through a stop sign and you got a traffic ticket. You're probably not going to burn out from that one instance. You're going to be a little bit off. You're probably not going to feel that great for the next day, but you'll wake up the next morning and maybe won't make the same mistake again. Burnout is a little bit different than that. Burnout is getting stuck in traffic that's moving but not quite moving fast enough every single day of your commute. Burnout is waking up with your alarm and hitting it multiple times and trying to change something but still feeling like you're in that Groundhog Day response. Burnout doesn't happen off of one instance, it happens off of multiple instances. That at the time that it happens, we don't worry too much about it. We're like, that was nothing. Don't worry about that. That was like a 5% stressor. But when you have 10 5% stressors happening within a day or a 24-hour period, we start to see that you're at risk for burning out. Your body's ability to adapt to that has become less. So how to tell if it's burnout that you're actually experiencing? Well, it's simple and it's super complicated at the same time. North American society is notorious for burning out. We live in a worker society. We are expected to wake up, go to our job, come home, go to bed, do the exact same thing all over again. And so burnout is really difficult when you're talking from a North American culture because it seems so common. But what actually happens is your entire HPA axis becomes affected. Your HPA axis is something known as your hypothalamus, your pituitary, and your adrenal glands. Those are your body's response and adaptility hormones, your body's response and adaptility hormones get secreted from that axis. So it starts in your adrenal glands. They produce cortisol, they produce adrenaline, and they produce some of your sex hormones. They produce that all into your bloodstream. The hypothalamus takes that all in as it goes through your brain within your bloodstream, and then it makes sense of it. And then it tells your pituitary gland, which is the third part of the HPA axis, how much of different hormones to secrete to help your system rebalance. So if you produce a lot of cortisol one day or in a 20-minute period, your hypothalamus and your pituitary are going to take that in and they're going to try and offset that by producing other hormones. What happens though is the longer your system has to make that leveling out happen, things get hit. Your sleep, your periods, your focus, your motivation, your memory, your energy, your sensitivity to light, your mood, your cravings, and your sex drive. They all get hit. And when we're talking about something in regards to caregiver burnout, but also survivorship burnout, what we start to see is that we get burnout lost in communication alongside other things. So your sleep is supposed to go off. No wonder you're not sleeping. Look at everything you're dealing with. No wonder your sex drive has dropped. Look at everything you're dealing with. And so we take this one piece of the puzzle and we say that's normal. But when you start looking at the entire piece of the puzzle, which is all of these symptoms that are on your slide right now, we go, That might be normal. It might not be killing you, but it's not fun to live with. And that's the quality of life conversation. So, symptoms of burnout. You're like, that's a laundry list. And you're like, it is a laundry list because the HPA axis is responsible for every single component of the rest of your body. It is literally your system's target response zone. Most common things that happen as you're starting to burn out is you don't wake up rested in the morning. You hit that alarm clock as often as you can because you're like, I just don't want to get out of bed. Your motivation to do fun things or to things that fill your bucket with joy drops. You'll get everything done. You'll show up, you'll go to your job, you'll do all the things you need to do. But then at the end of the day, all you want to do is sit on the couch and watch Netflix. And I love that we get to say watch Netflix because 5 years ago that wasn't a thing. But you're like, I'm so tired. I don't want to get up off the couch. I just want to sit here. And then you get really tired. And then you get a second wind. And that second wind generally happens anywhere from 6:30 to 9 o'clock at night, which means you're up probably for another 3 hours. So you're wired, but you're exhausted. Your short-term memory tanks. And ask yourself this question right now, like make this checklist. Do you know what you wore 2 days ago? Do you know what you ate for lunch 2 days ago? Can you tell me the route that you took to get home from work or from school or from a friend's house if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic? You walk into rooms, you forget why you're there. You make a list because you have to make a list. And then if you forget your grocery list on the kitchen counter, you're done. Like it's not happening. You're going to come home from the grocery store with everything but the things that were on your list. You might feel sad, but a lot of times with burnout, you see a lack of motivation more than sadness. And the difference between that is burnout is I don't want to get up off the couch. But if somebody were to drag you out, you would enjoy yourself. You'd have a good time. You'd be like, I'm really glad I went. Even though the entire week leading up to that, you were like, I really hope they cancel. I really hope they cancel. I don't want to do this anymore. With depression, we see that if someone were to drag you out to that same event, you'd still feel numb. You would still feel sad. And that's a really important differentiator between depression and burnout. You might get dizzy when you stand up from a sitting position or when you lay down to sit up way too quickly. Your appetite goes AWOL because your system doesn't know that it's not running from a bear. Because your cortisol has bumped a little bit and because your adrenaline has bumped a little bit, your system's like, the only time I used to do this was in prehistoric times when I had to run away from like, I don't know, a dinosaur. Let's just put it that way. And so your system goes like, I need to run. I don't want to stop and have sex. I don't want to stop and eat my lunch because A, I'd be lunch if that happened. So what your system does is it expends all its energy trying to run, but we're sitting at a desk or we're sitting in a hospital or we're going from a car to another seated position, which is why we get that weight gain right around our middle. Because cortisol plus adrenaline equals some pretty serious sugar and salt cravings. And our system, because it wants to run away from a bear, goes, I need all the extra energy I can get. So I'm just going to keep it here just in case I actually need to continue running. It gets complicated, but it also gets very simple. And when we start to look at how we feel when it comes to burnout, what we see is that we try and pinpoint these like, oh, well, I have to lose weight, or I have to sleep better, or I need more energy, which is that key point of burnout that I actually just forgot to say, is your energy's done. That mid-afternoon crash, you need like 3 cups of coffee to get through the day kind of thing. Or you want 3 cups of coffee or a Pepsi or Coke. If patients like that, they're like, I need to stop drinking my afternoon Pepsi. So your system kind of combines all of these different cues. And what we start talking about is one of them. right? We're like, I don't want to get out of bed in the morning. I am gaining weight and I can't get rid of it. My appetite is all over the place and I can't have a regular bowel movement. And it doesn't make sense until we put it all into this bigger picture. And we go like, oh, it's not that you're constipated, it's that your system literally thinks you're running from a bear. So let's work there. Let's try and adapt that. This is something known as the Yerkes-Donaldson graph. Let's put it that way. Basically what this is your motivation component. Stress, which everybody talks about from a burnout perspective, is actually really important. Too little amount of stress, you're going to see that your performance and your arousal are both very low. Your ability to get stuff done is very low. As that kind of little bit of cortisol, little bit of stress creeps in, you actually start to do more. You've got energy, you're building off of your day, your brain's kicking in, you don't have that brain fog until you get to your optimal arousal and optimal performance. This is a really important part to make sense of and to remember, because we don't want you to sit here and be like, stress is bad. Like, stress isn't bad. Stress is incredibly important. But too much stress tanks our ability to remember things. We can't increase our performance. We start forgetting things, everything that we just talked about on the slide previously. So we put this in here because we want you to know that this isn't just no stress, forget about it, just like stop stressing yourself out. We really want you to be leaving the end of this webinar going like, okay, like I feel like I actually have some tools to be able to support my system, not just eliminate it. Speaking of that funny thing called stress, stress is something we generally can't control. It is an automatic physical response to any stimulus. And we're talking like not even a bad stimulus. We're talking somebody closed the door too much, like too loudly. We're talking a phone went off. If anybody is in Nova Scotia last night at midnight, we got the emergency alert coming in. My heart rate went up. I was like, what was that? Arguments with your partners, illness, hot or cold, being in too warm a setting versus being in too cold a setting is going to trigger that stress response. So we think this is really important to remind you of, because what we don't want to have happen is you be like, I'm reacting in this way, but I don't even know why. And sometimes it's something as simple as you hit traffic, or your car didn't start right away, or you ran into somebody at a store that you didn't really want to talk to. All of those little tiny stressors trigger that cortisol response. And the more things in your day that trigger that cortisol response, the harder it is to slow your heart rate down. Does that make sense? Just checking. So this is the motivation component again, and this is basically a couple slides ago we talked about that HPA axis. This is what your HPA axis works as. So your adrenal glands, they sit on top of your kidneys. They literally look like little Santa Claus hats. They secrete cortisol and adrenaline and your sex hormones. And when one goes up, the others have to drop, which means cortisol goes up, your sex hormones go out. Cortisol tries to stay up for too long, adrenaline kicks in to keep you bouncing up, which is why you're great for 20 minutes and then you're done. And you're great for 20 minutes and then you're done. And you need an external stimulus coming in, like coffee, tea, caffeine, soft drinks, sugar, stuff from your vending machines, stuff that you can just grab to fill you up, to keep your brain going. Because at this point, what a lot of you are experiencing is, I don't know how to stop to cook a meal. Like maybe I need to do that, but I don't know how, because I need to be there with somebody else. And so you're grabbing things on the run. And what we're going to talk about in a couple slides is, okay, so you're grabbing things on the run. What do you grab? What doesn't spike your cortisol? What doesn't spike your adrenaline? All of that goes up into your brain from the hypothalamus and then to the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland is really interesting because from that gland comes your FSH and your LH. Those are two hormones that basically create a follicle and release an egg in the female system. So your period might change. You might have a short cycle, you might have a longer cycle. You might not ovulate 1 month, you might ovulate the next month. It can be very inconsistent, and it's really hard to live with when your period's not consistent. Your thyroid also gets hit. So generally, we don't see a thyroid going off from blood work until about 5 to 6 years after a long-term stressor hits. But it's one of the first things that we test from blood work. So it's important to remember that your thyroid is generally the last component of your stress axis, not the first component of your stress axis. Growth hormone comes from that pituitary gland as well, which impacts your hunger cues. There's so many things that get impacted in this burnout cascade. And so much power and so much truth comes from understanding what that is and not beating yourself up about it. So what makes survivors more likely to experience burnout? We'll move to Jeremy.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So, and I wanted to mention as well, on the last slide that Ashley mentioned there, is all these adaptations, like all these things that are going on physiologically in your body, I mean, they're normal, right? I mean, they're expected based on the stress process and the burnout that that you're going through as a survivor, as a caregiver. It's normal. We expect it. Like when people come into our office, they sit down and we know what they're going to say. Like we expect to hear these things, but it's not adaptable, right? I mean, this isn't something that's going to help in the long term, short or long. Well, short term, yes. In the long term, it's not going to help your body adapt. It's not going to help optimize your health and optimize your wellness, and be able to help you do what it is that you need to do.
Of
right?
that new normal, literally.
Yeah, and the analogy I like to use oftentimes is a simple one. If you just think about being out like on a lake, like on a nice calm lake, and you've got a nice boat sitting on a lake, kind of enjoying the weather, and then you have this speedboat that just drives right by you, and then it's going to create this wave, this motion of wave, right? So you've been disturbed, and long after that motorboat is gone, the waves are still here, right? So I mean, the stressor's gone, it's come and gone, but the results are still kicking.
Those ripples are still strong.
Yep. So it's going to take time to kind of settle out. So even though the stressor's not there, and you may say, no, I'm not too stressed, I feel like I have everything under control, I'm all good, everything's all right. Your body's thinking otherwise. Your body's trying to kind of reestablish the balance again. So what makes survivors more likely to experience burnout? Well, these are all the things here, right? So this is specifically for survivors. These are for people who, for all of you out there who have been diagnosed, have gone through the process and are where you are right now. So the cancer process itself. So we know when it comes to cancer, whether it's any of the blood cancers or any other type of cancer, for the most part, for that matter, metabolism is just disrupted. So the key stimulator in your body is how your cells actually generate energy, and how they produce energy, and how they help make things work, and how they help drive you forward. So those are disrupted. So when you have a disrupted metabolism, your energy is like Ashley said, tanked. So you lose that ability to kind of create that energy, maintain that energy. And then the energy diversion. So with the cancer process, I mean, your body it just makes sense. I mean, if you're disrupted, if you have disruptive thoughts, if you're with a group of people and someone's kind of knocking on your shoulder, and you're trying to divert your energy elsewhere, that energy gets diverted elsewhere. So it's the lack of energy that's driven based on that cancer process. And then the kill versus growth rate. So your body's always trying to work for you as best as it can. So even though, let's say it's your immune system or other parts of your physiology that are working towards trying to slow that cancer growth down, you're losing the battle, really. The energy wise, you're losing the battle, because your body's killing the cancer cells, yes, but the cancer is maybe growing. So it's that balance. So between that kill rate and that growth rate, it really takes a lot of the energy out of you. Treatment wise, of course, obviously many of you out there can speak on this, of course. So surgery, chemotherapy, immune therapies, radiotherapy, we know how that impacts you physically, mentally, spiritually, everything else. It's hard. So this makes it a lot easier, and people that have been through this process a lot more susceptible to burnout. Yeah, for sure. And then the recovery, right? So during the recovery process, you've been through all that kind of stuff, and then your immune system has to recover. It has to build itself back up again. Your cells have to regrow. They have to learn how to function again. And the elimination, so all the therapies, so some of the drug therapies, your body has to eliminate those. And so that all takes a lot of energy. So that makes you a lot more susceptible to the burnout process. So what we're talking about here when we're talking about working with burnout is it comes down what we sort of term the 4 A's. And it's simple. We make it simple. So acknowledgement, acceptance, asking, and acting. So first, obviously, in order to address the stress and address the burnout, you need to acknowledge that it's there. So, you know, sometimes we all know, yes, I know this is present. I know this is here. I know I'm stressed. I know I'm burnt out. I know I'm whatever. But you really have to stop and acknowledge, say, yes, I have it. I mean, there's a lot of times in life where you know, we think, no, it's fine. I'm fine. But you know, eventually you're going to come around. It's going to catch up, and you're going to say, okay, yes, I'm burnt out. I need help. So the second step is,
or it's not okay. It's okay to not be okay.
It's okay to not be okay. Yeah, and which is part of the acceptance. The number 2 is the acceptance. So you have to accept the fact that it's present, and you have to accept that you need help. You have to accept, okay, you know, I can't do this by myself. I can't keep on, you know, going full tilt 24/7 for, you know, for my spouse, for my partner, for my friend, for my loved one, or if you're the survivor. I can't continue to do this on my own. I need help. Like I'm not going to survive this alone. I need help. So that's the acceptance part. Okay, I accept it. I'm not perfect. I can't do this alone. And then
come on, speak for yourself, right?
Yeah, and then you need to ask, reach out. So you need to ask. So are you willing to ask for help? You know. And it may be a loved one, it may be your partner, it may be, you know, the other person that's involved in this entire process, or it may be a friend. It may be simply saying, you know, I need you. I need to go out. You know, we need to get out. I need to spend 2 hours with you. I just need to sit down and talk. It doesn't have to be asking someone to, you know, make a life commitment to, you know, the next several months. You know, being able to fulfill all the caregiving needs that that you no longer feel as though you can manage on your own. It might be something simple. Just, I need you to listen to me. I need, you know, we need to go for a dinner. We need to just sit and talk. I just need some time. And then, of course, number 4 is act. You need to act on it. So after all this, everything sounds wonderful, but you need to act, right? If someone's willing to say, I can help you, you know, I can take your kids for a few hours this week, and you can do what you need to do. You know, take some time for yourself, or do what you need to do. That's you need to be able to accept that willingness to from somebody else to help you out.
That's like the hardest one.
Which is the hardest one?
In all honesty, out of all of that, the hardest one is actually acting on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. So, and then we have lifestyle factors. So these are the things that we look at. So how are you going to work, and how are we going to work together through the stress and burnout process? Well, these are the 2 key points here. So supportive parameters and wellness parameters. So of course, like I just mentioned, support from others. So you have to be willing to reach out, to listen to others, to accept others' help. Self-coping. So what are those coping mechanisms? Maybe you don't have any self-coping mechanisms. Maybe you have some great self-coping mechanisms, but maybe you haven't had time to partake in those self-coping mechanisms. So how are we going to work at putting these pieces together so they will actually help kind of move you forward and begin the healing process in terms of supporting your body to pull away from that burnout point? And acknowledgement from other people. So you need other people to say, you know, it's okay, you know, it's okay. I am not okay. You need to be okay with the fact that I'm not okay. So if you're helping somebody else out, and that person is always asking, demanding, like I need, you know, it's communication. So I always talk about, you know, coming on that busy highway. We have a lot of analogies with vehicles and cars driving in traffic, but
cars in traffic right now.
It makes sense. You're pulling onto that busy highway. You know you want to merge in there. You don't have your signal on, but you know in your mind, I got to get in there. Someone's going to let me in. But no one really knows that you want to get in there in front of them unless you turn your signal on. So you need to communicate. You need to let that person know. And I think communication is one of the key key aspects of all of this. You know, if you're having issues and, you know, there's some guilt, you know, I feel guilty asking my partner to help me all the time, or, you know, I feel guilty to take time for myself away from my partner or from away from my loved one. I can't help all the time. It's about communication. Maybe they don't know. Talk to them. Sit down and have a conversation and talk and lay it out on the table and just be honest.
From a talking perspective, one of the books that we like to recommend a lot to our patients is something called The 5 Love Languages. It totally sounds a little woo-woo. It's definitely a little woo-woo, but it's great. And what it does is it has this idea that we all communicate a little bit differently. And so a lot of times communication breaks down in maybe relationships or partnerships, not because you aren't communicating, but because you're communicating using 2 different languages. And so this is something that can really help put you both on the same language process. And so that takes a lot of that, like, well, I did the dishes, and like this, like my act of service is how I communicate how I feel. Whereas somebody's like, I just want to sit and talk. And so it can be a really helpful tool to start to understand which languages you speak in your partnership.
Perfect, thank you. And then the wellness parameters, right? So this is, so we have the supportive, so this is the wellness. This is like, take a step back. So look at your life just as an individual, as a person, and, you know, look at, you know, what are my goals? What are my goals for myself? What are my goals for my relationship, for my family, for my loved one, for the person I'm supporting, from the person I'm receiving support from? You know, what does it look like in an ideal world for me? And we know when it comes to wellness is not just health. So health is one aspect of wellness. So health is like physical health. Health is, like Dr. Ashley mentioned, you know, sleeping better. You know, can I get a restorative sleep? Can I recover from what I'm doing? You know, the day in, day out things of what I'm doing. The mental aspect of things, right? What about my thoughts? You know, do I always find myself in a negative thought process? So how can that aspect of my life change? Can I interrupt my negative thought process? You know, can I finally come to a point where I can learn to, you know, instead of having that automatic, you know, I can't do this anymore. This is not good. This is not fun. Can I interrupt that and say, I can't do this. It's difficult for me, but look where I'm at, and, you know, I'm going to take this as a learning process. I'm going to go to the next step, and, you know, can we kind of work that way? And then this spiritual. So there's a variety of different aspects of wellness that we need to look at, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to carry this on as a burden either. So we don't have to take all of these aspects of our wellness and say, hey, I need to improve this, and this all at the same time. It might be a matter of, you know, I've been eating out 5 days a week, you know, and when I'm at home, all I can eat is a white piece of bread with, you know, some peanut butter just to kind of get me through the day. Well, maybe it may mean, you know, I'm going to start drinking more water. I'm going to just, you know, watch what I eat. I'm going to make an effort that way. And once that aspect of wellness changes, it drives other aspects of your wellness to change as well.
And one of the reasons we really wanted to pinpoint on this in this presentation is if you start to Google in the most loving way possible, you see these huge expectations, right? So start exercising, change your diet, X, Y, and Z, all of these different things, improve your communication, X, Y, like all of these things. And a lot of times that's incredibly overwhelming. So we go, that sounds really nice, but I can't handle that right now. Like, that's not important. Something else is bigger. And where almost all of you are sitting listening to this web series, there are more important things out there. It is a completely different conversation. When it comes to wellness parameters and when it comes to supporting kind of those cornerstones of health, it's simple changes. It's insert something like, let's just drink more. Let's bring a water bottle with us in the car. That's all we have to do. We're just going to bring the water bottle. And then we're going to aim, you know, a week later after that becomes routine, we're going to aim to drink that twice a day. And then maybe we're going to continue to eat out, but let's try and put something green on the plate. Or maybe we're going to attempt to take the stairs up to the 4th floor of the hospital as opposed to taking the elevator. Like, somebody takes the elevator up and we'll meet you up there. it's little tiny changes like that that lead to that long-term benefit in terms of supporting burnout processes. And so we're not going to sit here and be like, you need to do this huge list of a million things, because we wouldn't do that huge list of a million things. We go like, which one is the most critical? And so the conversations we have a lot of times with patients is like, okay, what's affecting everything else? A lot of patients in my office, they're not digesting food. So then we can't build stamina, we can't build energy, we can't build muscle mass, we can't help cells regenerate faster if you're not absorbing. So then our goals become, let's just get you absorbing food. You know, if you're sitting in Jeremy's office, it may be a slightly different conversation, but it's not this huge lifestyle change. It's tweak and initialize, tweak and maintain, initialize, tweak and maintain.
And it's exactly, it's a simple thing. So again, it's, you know, fuel the vehicle with gas. I mean, you're pushing the pedal on an empty gas tank. You're not going anywhere. Doesn't matter how fancy or expensive or, you know, sporty your car is.
It doesn't matter if you're trying to beat up like Toyota or this brand new Mercedes. It doesn't have gas. It doesn't matter.
That's right. And then from an integrative, specific integrative medical perspective, so how do we intervene? What kind of things do we do? So the lifestyle stuff and the wellness stuff, that's kind of the overarching approach. This is specifically, how do we intervene? Like, how do we help, you know, the survivors, and how do we help the caregivers get over the burnout and come back from burnout and come back to a balance and like more of a normalcy? So the overall life and health assessment. So it's just trying to determine, you know, what's your health position? Where are you at now? Where were you, you know, a year ago, 6 months ago, 3 months ago, or even 5 years ago? Where are you now? And where can we predict you're going to be in the future?
Or where do you want to be?
And where do you want to be, right? And what are those obstacles? What are those obstacles to health? So what kind of things in your life right now are creating those diversions or those obstacles? And on the flip side, on the positive side, what are those drivers to health? So what kind of things you have going for you? So you're burnt out, you know, you can't go another day, and you know it, and you feel it.
You're like, I'm done.
Exactly. But you look around you and you say, you know, look at all these wonderful family and wonderful friends, or, you know, a specific friend or somebody that I have in my life that, you know, if I was just to give them a call, or just to finally take them up on their offer of saying, you know, I'm here to help you. What are those things that are working in your favor? So we look at all those things, and we assess where you're at that way. And then the second thing we do is look at the symptoms, right? Like, you're burnt out, you're stressed, you're in overdrive, you're overworked. So what?
Your body is overworked.
Yep.
That is a critical component.
Yes, absolutely. So your physiology, as much as your mind wants to keep going, your body's saying, it's not going to happen. So what have you been experiencing? So what kind of symptoms have you been experiencing? Just like fatigue, all those things that Ashley already had mentioned. What are you experiencing? Have you been experiencing? What are you experiencing now? So what's that change been like? So how severe? So maybe before all of this started, you're always tired, right? But now you're so extremely fatigued and tired, you just can't muster any energy to, you know, take care of your family, take care of yourself, get up, anything. How's the recovery process been, right? So maybe the last several years, your diet's been, you know, hasn't been wonderful, we'll put it like that. But over the last several months, you've made that positive effort to improve your diet, because you know you're burning out. How has your body responded to that recovery? So is that, you know, how resilient is your body to support it? And then what does that change look like over time? So again, resiliency. So do we have a lot of work to do, a lot of work ahead of us, or do we have a little bit? Like, we just have to kind of put a few things in place that will drive your body back to where it should be. And continue with integrative methods, so treatment and support. So these are the things that we look at. And we've already sort of touched on these things. So lifestyle-wise, so as Dr. Ashley mentioned, these are the cornerstones. So dietary. So dietary, that's one of those key words. You know, diet is not the word to use. We're talking about nutrition. We're talking about food. We're talking about a wholesome approach to the foods that you're consuming.
Or like bringing your appetite back so that you actually just want to eat at logical times of the day.
Yeah.
Like, that's the conversation like I have with patients in my office all the time. They're like, I have no desire to eat until 8 o'clock at night, and then all I want to do is eat a bowl of potato chips. I'm like, cool, okay, let's eat a bowl of potato chips and then have a smoothie at the same time. And then a couple weeks later, we're adding something else in. Those foundations are so, they seem so scary, but they can be so simple. And it comes down to like, how much energy are you getting in?
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And it's not, and there's really zero blame. It's not a blame game at all. I mean, there's a physiology going on here. So your body, so you want one thing, and your body wants, is working in another direction. So so it's not your fault, it's the physiology. So we need to correct the physiology, and that will help to kind of correct the process going forward and help you feel better. Movement, so I never say exercise, because as I actually said, stress is a good thing, but stress, whether it's a positive stress or a negative stress, when you're in the burnout phase, it's not helpful.
Like, for those of you who are runners and watching this, I applaud you. Well done. Good job. I am not a runner. I will never be a runner. I'm cool with that. Running, if you are not used to running, will trigger that fight or flight response better than, like, more than anything else. So if you are not a runner, like I am, we strongly advise you to not take up running as a form of exercise. Something like yoga, something like walking, something like paddleboarding would be highly conducive to helping to manage the burnout. Yep,
perfect, definitely. And then sleep. So we touched on sleep already, and sleep is one of those things, lifestyle-wise, that we think about in isolation. So I can't sleep. I haven't slept for, you say to yourself, I haven't slept for 3 years, or I haven't slept for 3 months, or I haven't slept for 3 weeks. So it's not about us giving you something, or us suggesting something, or your physician saying, let's put that sleep issue to rest and give you something so you can sleep. It's over the 24-hour period. So the hormones, the hormones, the stress system, we have to work, from the time you wake up in the morning to the time you actually get to sleep at night. And then the stress burnout. So we look at hormones, we look at immune system. How can we modulate that, and how can we improve that? And then obviously for this survivors, the anti-cancer process. So we need to look at pathways, immunity, environment, internal terrain. So what is the body doing internally that we can help kind of support? Because there's stress going on all the time, right? This process is always happening. So we need to be able to support that process with everyone who's gone through this. So
we're not going to read you a laundry list of things too. Like, I would highly advise you, if you're watching this, grab your phone, take a picture of the screen, because these are the things that you can slowly implement into your day-to-day that will start to address the burnout symptoms. And what we want you to know, kind of going through this, like, recovering from burnout position, is you're going to feel better for a little bit, and then you're going to hit a plateau, and then you're going to feel better for a little bit, and you're going to hit a plateau. And every time you hit one of those plateaus, that's an area where maybe you use nutraceuticals, maybe you use a medication, maybe you use somebody's help from outside to get through those plateaus, so that the work that you do with your foundation, so your sleep, your movement, your nutrition, and your happiness, like that spiritual side, can kick in and move you through the next level. So those foundations most of the time aren't the only things that get you through a plateau, but holy cow, do they help with those upward momentums. So take a picture of the screen, come back to it later. We're going to flip to the next one because it has a couple more. And then I think we're just about to bump into questions.
For sure. So for those recovering from burnout, specifically survivors, I mean, you have that previous list that actually said, grab a snapshot, and choose one or two, because they're definitely critical. But that above list, plus these for survivors. I mean, we need to talk about and address treatment recovery from all the treatments you've received. So how can we bring your body back from that and get you well and get you to feel better? Recurrence reduction support. So what's the potential here? So where are you positioned in terms of remission and cure? We want to make sure that you're staying there, right, and you stay healthy. So we want to kind of work on that support as well. And then of course, quality of life measures. So whether it's, pain or fatigue or, not feeling yourself, not feeling well, we need to work on those measures as well. So all those things are sort of in addition to the previous list. I think that's where we're going to leave it at now. I know there's some questions.
So, you're going to run through those, correct?
Yes, I will. I want to thank you both first and foremost. That was some really valuable information. Thank you so much. That was great. I will jump into question number 1. So what communication lines are present between caregivers and healthcare professionals after discharge? Are these lines actively maintained?
Oh, is that yours or mine? I can't remember.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay. So when there's 2 areas to this. The first of it is when you're in a hospital setting, there's definitely a process that's followed. It's follow-up in 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. We do MRIs, CTs, scans, etc. on a predetermined timeline based off of the cancer that you experience. So that's research driven, that's science driven from a numerical kind of cell turnover perspective. When you're working with kind of your supportive kind of healthcare providers like us, like naturopathic doctors, like your massage therapists, like your osteopaths, like your physios, like your chiropractors, that side of that supportive team, the communication becomes a little bit different. So we're never going to do we just want to follow up in 3 months to see how you're doing. We're going to do cell turnover for sleep cycles is generally 6 to 8 weeks. Cell turnover for your digestive system is every 2 weeks. Cell turnover for cardiac systems is in that 6 to 9 month range. And so what we're doing is as we move through that burnout cascade and start to kind of target in on very specific areas, we actively maintain our communication via the cell turnover that we'd expect. So we're not going to have you in a week if we're working on something that's cortisol based or sleep based that we know is going to take 6 to 8 weeks to really notice that difference. So all of those kind of communication lines are determined based off of cell division and cell growth.
Yeah, and we're looking at we're looking at endpoints. So we're looking at medical endpoints, of course, whether it's from the burnout or whatever it is. But we're also looking at the quality of life measurements. So based on that, like Ashley said, it may be a couple of weeks, it may be a month. How are you feeling in a month's time? Let's sit down, let's chat about it again, let's see where you're at, and let's go from there. So it's all individual and dependent. But yeah, we definitely maintain the lines of communication, make sure that our patients are moving in the right direction.
Question number 2. I realize it's all about perspective. However, how can I keep from getting angry with people who complain about the small things?
I mean, if you figure this one out, please let us know. We're not saints up here either. Perspective is huge, but reference points are even greater. And so reference points are basically how you determine where you're sitting in, let's say, the scale of humanity. It's one of the reasons that people who win the lottery actually struggle very much after they win the lottery because their reference points change completely. So they go from maybe I have an old beat up truck, let's just say, I'm totally gonna put a picture on this, and I live in a house that's got a mortgage on it, to I can now afford a boat to send my kids to school, no problem, my house is paid off and I've got a second house at a lake. Your reference points changed completely in overnight. And what happens a lot with caregivers and with the survivorship story is that your reference points change completely overnight. And so it's very hard to talk with people about things that aren't even on your list of priorities. And so knowing where you're at and where your reference points are can be really helpful to give you perspective that stops a lot of that anger. And so your reference point might be I got up and I put on clothes today. That is a massive reference point. You don't care that Susie burnt her banana bread while she was baking for the PTA. You're that doesn't matter. And so apologies if your name is Susie and you burnt your banana bread today. But that's we talk a lot about reference points with something like that, because it takes the guilt out of the conversation.
And the other part is, if you think about, so if you separate your real life from let's say vacation life, and you're on vacation, there are those little small things. They don't tend to matter as much because we're more relaxed, we're more settled, we're more balanced. So from the burnout perspective, the stress perspective, as your body changes and sort of rebalances itself again, all those little small things that should matter begin not to matter anymore. So your response to those things change, and you begin to become more accepted to them, and it,
you're not as heightened.
You're not as heightened. Yes.
Yeah.
Good word.
Question number 3. What do I need to know about health and nutrition to help my partner thrive?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, for sure. So this is a big one. This is a big question. This is somewhere where from the integrative perspective, where we really shine, because health and nutrition, I mean, that's a whole scope. That's like your entire scope of life, basically. That's a huge parameter of life. So we look at things like what kind of foods do I need to eat that are gonna be good for me and good for my partner. So what are those foods that give you energy? What are those foods that give you sustained energy? We all know about the coffee kind of spike and drop, the caffeine spike and drop. So what are those foods? So things like that. Healthy fats, right? Healthy fats are great. So we encourage people a lot of the times to eat healthy fats during during the recovery phase of burnout and stress. So
we're very pro cheese over here.
So yeah, so when digestively, so if you're eating a super healthy food like an apple, for example, I mean, it's a beautifully packaged food from nature that does so much for us. However, if you have high blood sugars, if your blood sugar is spiking up and down, something like eating a fruit on its own is gonna continue to spike that. So if you're adding a healthy fat, if you're adding a protein to it, it's gonna slow the digestive process down. It's going to maintain your energy for a lot longer. It's going to bring more clarity, more focus, and support your body in the short and the long run.
Simple is always best. Don't complicate it with, I need to have this specific herb in this food, or this specific nutrient in this food, or I need to look at macros, or I need to look at micros. When it comes to managing burnout, we want to make sure that your system is as even keel as possible. And when it comes to managing the post-cancer side of things, we want you to get energy in, like, period. So I was like, I don't care if you want to eat chicken soup every single day for the next week. I was like, eat it, go for it. Pack it through with a couple of extra vegetables, maybe put some like really high quality fiber dense like noodles in, some really good like nutrient dense chicken from different parts of the bone. Like, if you can make broth, but like you don't even have to, like, I don't know if I can say this, Simon, tell me if I can't, but like Superstore makes an absolutely phenomenal broth that like, so we pair, right? So you go like, I'm not going to make my broth from scratch. I'm going to buy it, but I'm going to like put in a pile of extra veggies, right? And so it comes simple and almost pre-packaged, but not complicated.
Yeah, and then I think the other side, really quick, the other side of things are, what are those foods that we're trying to steer away from? And it's easy to say, just eliminate all of that stuff. It's harder to do for any of us.
Way harder to do.
So it's about replacing something or adding something healthy, and then once that's in place, then we can slowly take away the poor food choices.
Yeah, and like we just made that a really complicated answer. The simple thing is as often as you can in a day, have something green, have a protein, have a healthy fat, and have a fiber. And if you can do those 4 things, you're good.
Question number 4. Would you recommend taking a leave from work to care for a loved one?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one to answer. I mean, it's we have sit downs with our patients all the time, and this comes up. And different provinces and jurisdictions, we're able to to write medical notes for leaves, and other ones we're not. So, but I think it depends on your current state and your current balance. So, I say yes, 100%. Would recommend taking a leave from work if you feel the balance is extremely skewed and you can't manage, you can't you can't go to work and focus and do your job.
Mm-hmm.
If you know something's wrong there and if something's just not clicking in properly, then absolutely you need to take time off.
And it may not be even a leave from work. It might be like, I need to go down, like, if I'm a caregiver, I am, at the hospital, like Monday and Tuesday are big days. So then you go like, I'm going to work a reduced schedule. So maybe Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm in the office a little bit more, but Monday, Tuesday, I'm not worried about that. It's such a tough question to answer, because it's not as simple as saying like, yes, take a leave from work and look after this person. It's much more difficult when you're going like, okay, so who do I work for? And what does the support look like financially? And do I have kids, or am I a guardian of somebody else? Do I have elderly parents that I'm also thinking about? Do I have medical debt that I might need to worry about? Can I get enough medications in? There are so many conversations that can skew that. So one of the conversations that's really important is going like, okay, who's our support system? How are we going to do this together? And really sitting down with your partner at that time, or whoever you're kind of really caregiving for, or if you're going through it, how do you kind of recommend that, or have that conversation with your partner of like, what's important? Where do we want that focus? And being on the same page with communication can make all of the difference.
100%.
Question number 5. What are the tools for a survivor and caregiver to use to cope with stress and depression?
So I think we touched on some important aspects. One of those slides there that again Ashley said, take a snapshot of that. I think that's huge, right? So when it comes to stress and burnout, it's a matter of, like Ashley said, the balance. What's your current balance? So are you able to manage your life as it is now? Because you're only as good as as your worst day, right? So you need to make sure, whatever I can do now to balance, and am I able to give myself time for myself, right? Because I need to recuperate, I need to recover. I can't be burned out 24/7 expect any sort of positive output on this. So whether it's something simple like on the slide there, like deep breathing. So you can literally sit for 1 minute or less, 30 seconds. You can take 2 to 3 deep breaths. I mean, science shows that'll drop your blood pressure down by more than 10 points within minutes. You can get outside. You can, if you have access to, to any sort of nature, you can get outside and, agree that, I have 20 minutes, once a week or twice a week to go for a walk, to sit in a park, just to kind of have some space to breathe, those types of things. So those are sort of the tools, in my opinion, that caregivers need in terms of coping.
Mm-hmm. And the other important conversation with that is and we get this question a lot more based off of the nature of work that we do, but people come in and be like, I don't want to go on an antidepressant. And the conversation that we have is very much okay, so antidepressants have great research behind them. If they're being recommended by your team, that's an important consideration to take in. You need to consider all aspects of care. So if an antidepressant is going to help drop you from running at 140 all of the time down to 90, that just opens up a lot more capacity in your day to deal with your stressors, to give yourself a little bit of self-care. And self-care isn't like spending a pile of money on pretty bath bombs. Self-care is like sitting and going to bed at a consistent time and getting some sort of movement in each day. And it's we're talking 5 minutes of movement. You don't need to go to the gym for 2 hours kind of thing. And so it comes down to how much of a benefit can something give you if you're going to take something as well. So don't rule that out. It's some of the natural things work great, absolutely, but they might take longer. And if you're in an automatic stress or fight or flight response right now, we need to drop you out of that first and then work on building you up. And so both of those kind of components have to work together. They're best when you do it at the same time or one after each other. And it's best when you've got a plan.
Mm-hmm.
Question number 6. As a caregiver, I feel like I'm constantly on. How do I get over the guilt of wanting to take some time for myself?
Oh,
Good question.
it's like mom guilt times 100. Like literally, caregiver guilt is, so guilt is really interesting because like, and you can go deep dive into yourself for this one, but like ask yourself why you feel guilty. Do you feel guilty that you're not there? Do you feel guilty that you can't fix it? Do you feel guilty that this person is going through it and I'm not? Do you feel guilty that like, you know, if something happens, you're going to be the one that gets to, you know, continue on? Those are really important conversations to have with yourself to try and figure out where that guilt is coming from. The larger picture, and how I like to talk about it with my patients, and I know Jeremy does as well, is how do we eliminate the personal side of that? So we use something we call capacity numbers. Capacity, like what's your capacity, basically. So capacity is something that when we're working with our entrepreneurs, our CEOs on avoiding burnout, this is how we strategize it through. So the same thing applies to caregiving and surviving and building yourself back out of burnout. It doesn't matter what your story is, your physiological response is the same. So think about your capacity as how much time am I able to give in a day to myself, to my family, to who I'm caregiving for, to making lunches in the morning, to putting a kid to bed, to taking care of my elderly parents, to volunteer activity that brings me joy, like X, Y, and Z. Map out all of those things that can happen in your day. And then we give percentages to them. So certain days you might be able to give 70% to your partner who you're caregiving for, or your friend who you're caregiving for. Other days it might be 20%, because maybe 50% of it has to go to work. Or maybe, you know, you haven't seen your kids or really been present with them for a while, so you really want to give more to them that day. And if you can map it out into like, where am I, like the percentages of where I am putting my present self, it allows the more quality than quantity. And so if you're running that hamster wheel over and over again, your brain is going to start doing the like, okay, so I'm sitting here with this person, but I need to do X, Y, Z. Don't forget to pick up this. Don't forget to call so-and-so about this. Like you're not always there. And so is it better to be there presently for 30% of the time and then go and do everything else? Or is it better to be there 80% of the time on that hamster wheel? And so use those percentages.
That's great. And then I think one other thing I wanted to mention as well is I'm saying this, I've had you know, many patients sit in front of me, and you know, they're like, that's the exact same question. Like, how do I get rid of this? How do I get rid of this guilt? Like, I'm not myself. I can't do it anymore, but any time for myself. You know, I've posed the question in the past many times. That person that you're supporting, that you're looking after, helping with, have you talked to them? Have you stated this to them? Have you said like, I'm burnt out. Like I need a day, or I need an hour, I need 15 minutes, you know, every afternoon, or, you know, at night or in the morning for myself. And, you know, they're like, no, I've never actually, like, we've never talked about this.
A lot of times we don't talk about it either.
Mm-hmm.
We just assume things.
So yeah, so talking to the person, they may be like, oh, I had no idea. You seem like you're just, you know, you're going strong. Everything is going well. I had no idea you felt this way. Yeah, for sure. Like, I love you. Go. You need to spend time for yourself. Go out, take 20 minutes, take an hour, whatever the conversation is, and that may in itself be quite helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Question number 7. How can I help my partner get over her guilt of needing my help since her diagnosis?
Flip the question.
Mm.
Like make it, like take the guilt out of the equation. Flip the question. Instead of going, what do you need help with today? Go, I am going to the grocery store. What would you like me to pick up? I am going to the office, or, you know, for an hour. What do you like? Do you want to go for a walk or cook something when I get home? It's like, it's going to sound weird to say, but it's the same thing we do with toddlers a little bit. It's like, give choices. Because when you're in such a state of like, I'm thinking about chemo and I'm thinking about diagnoses and I'm thinking about all of these things, the last thing you want to do is have to make a decision, right? And so the easier it is to make a decision, the less guilt there is, because that person doesn't feel like they now need to reach out for something more again. They may feel like they're already overstepping by asking you to come to all these appointments and take time out of your day. And so eliminate as much of those decision-making factors as you can. What can I get for you? What 3 things would you like my help with today? What sheets would you like put on the bed next? What clothes would you like to wear tomorrow? Not how can I help? Give very precise questions, and it makes a world of difference.
Great.
Go ahead.
That was great. That'll be all for our question and answer period today. I want to thank you both for sharing with us today such valuable information. I think that everyone is very appreciative of the information that you shared today, and I think you've helped people quite a bit. I would also like to thank everyone who's watching today for joining our webcast. I'd like to remind everyone to please visit our website to register for our upcoming webcast, COVID-19 Conversation with a Hematologist, which is airing Thursday, June 18th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. I'd also like to thank CIBC, who is our national partner for Your Life After Cancer program. Thank you. I'd just like to also remind everyone to visit Your Life After Cancer for more resources. It's yourlifeaftercancer.ca for more resources. Don't hesitate to contact your community services managers for support at each step of your blood cancer experience. We are here to help. I would like to remind everyone that a short survey will be sent out to all participants after this webcast. We would greatly appreciate you taking a moment to fill it in, as it really helps us to offer you the most valuable information in the near future. So thank you all again for joining us. Have a wonderful day and stay safe, everyone.